My co-founder, Natalie Kontov, and I, we met at a networking event at a conference, a marketing conference, which was originally hosted by Young Women in Digital, a community for young women in digital marketing. And that event was great. That community was great. I had also belonged to a different community at the time called Women in Sports and Events, the acronym WISE. Both of us loved these types of communities and the support, the education that they offered. But when we started to look around, because we had stayed in touch after connecting at this event, we started to look around for like the next community that we should join, because I was no longer a young woman in digital and I was no longer in sports. So I like to call it, I graduated from those communities. And we realized the options were limiting. They were either like too broad for our taste, like tech ladies, wonderful community, but like I wanted to just be with marketers selfishly, or they were too niche and I'm more of a marketing generalist. So like I love Product Marketing Alliance. I've been to one of their conferences. I've been a member at times, but like I'm not a product marketer. It's just a piece of sometimes what I do. And so we looked at each other and we're like, well, we just want a space for like women and non-binary folks in marketing, full stop. And so we decided to build it ourselves. Just talk to peers, like find somebody in the same role title as you at a different org. Maybe you don't know them at all. And I think as soon as you compare your experience, your skill set, to theirs, and it's almost like a mirroring technique, right? Like you're finding somebody that has the same role responsibilities as you're suffering from imposter syndrome, but they're not. And you just realize like you validate all of your years of experience by talking to these people. In some cases, like sounds snooty, but some cases, like for me, I'm like, oh, I could do that job, And I think that is the validation that a lot of people flounder and can't arrive at themselves internally when you're in the vacuum of like your own organization. But when you again validate it externally, all of a sudden things start unlocking for you and confidence starts building and you're like, oh, yeah, I could do that, right? Marketing is an interesting field because I think the stats say it's like over 70% women in marketing, right? So there's no shortage of women, gender representation from women in marketing. That's not the problem. The problem is once you get to the top, it's a lot of guys. And that's great. I've worked for a couple of really smart men, but the reality is I think too often women in marketing are forced to handle things that are not overtly, tied to revenue. Women in marketing are too often pushed back against in terms of getting like buy-in for a big idea. They often are I've seen it firsthand, women be the scapegoat for a big brand mishap that really was led by men. And, the woman just got the axe for it. So I think that we see this time and time again from both large orgs as well as startups. I've seen it in both, and I've heard of people experiencing it and witnessing it in both settings. And so while we offer technical education at Marketing Women, I think, again, going back to the trauma bond, fortunately and unfortunately, a lot of our successful work is really tied to building women's confidence and like validating women's skill sets and empowering them to go out and ask for the raise, the title that they deserve, because we're all significantly underpaid and taken advantage of, quite frankly. There's typically this like weird gatekeeping that happens where it's like, I don't know, like even in the world of sports, people will be like, oh, well, you're going to have to start at the bottom if you want to get into a sports brand. It's like, relax. Like, you don't need to put yourself on this huge pedestal. And that's really what what A bothers me in terms of like career progression for people who want to switch from B2C to B2B or vice versa, or again, any other like lane change, because there's a couple different ones. But I also think that like if we broke down those walls, the marketing, the creativity that would be a result of that, like it's it's impossible to even imagine because I know so many brilliant people on both sides, and yet they again are so like up on their high horse about their specific industry and company that you don't get that connection. And part of the reason we wanted marketing women to be so broad from an industry perspective was was precisely trying to fix that problem of like, man, if I could pair, somebody from my team at Vendor with somebody on my team at New Balance and like see what sort of learnings were like unlocked. I think it's a shame that folks get too stuck in their silos and in their vacuums and don't empower themselves to really learn from each other as marketers.